some of the things that's happening within our community. There are a lot of things that's transpiring in our community, and we simply need to be abreast of some of those things that's going on. So I really want people to just to listen, just to see what we're talking about and see what's going on. So first and foremost, we understand that there's a lot of violence in our community, and with that, it comes a lot of turmoil, a lot of anguish that's in our community. So, how do we look to resolve this situation? How do we resolve this situation? Well, one, we gotta not add to the situation. I think sometimes we add to situations and make them worse or exacerbate them simply because we interject ourselves where we shouldn't interject ourselves. A lot of people, a few people have lost their lives. Over the years, a tremendous amount of people have lost their lives to gun violence right here in this city. In the last few weeks, we've had several individuals to have lost their lives due to violence. However, we got to look at this from a perspective. All of us aren't, going to church every Sunday. Everybody ain't going to church every Sunday. Everybody ain't praising God and worshiping and, keeping their nose clean, staying out of trouble. Everybody ain't doing that. So at some point we got to come to reality and we got to say, hey man, some people are in an atmosphere that's conducive to this type of violence. Some of us place ourselves in that. So what we have to do is start thinking about where we're going, what we're doing, the things that we're saying out of our mouth. And with that, we might be able to see some change. And I'm talking to individuals who are finding themselves at the unfortunate end of this violence. It's not everybody that's going out here looking to be injured in some way, shape, or form. But many of us find ourselves in this particular position. So what I want to say is, hey man, you got to avoid this nonsense as often as you possibly can. And then you look at the family members of individuals who've been at the receiving end of this violence, and we got to say something to them. Say, hey man, listen, this is an unfortunate thing that has happened to you and your family. But please think straight as you move into the days after something tragic has happened, because you don't want more tragedy to happen after this particular act of violence because it has impacted your family. And listen to what I'm saying. People start to react in a manner that's conducive to more violence when something happens to them. Hey man, I'm not immune to it. I know there are people out there who loved ones have been killed and in a manner that's really traumatizing to the family. And then you got family members who are now up in arms saying, we're going to kill somebody too. Hey man, listen, I don't think that's the answer. In fact, I know that's not the answer. What you have to do is you're going to definitely, and ladies and gentlemen, listen, I'm not naive to the fact that it's easier said than done. But violence perpetuates violence. That's a fact. If you got people out here talking about we're going to get some get back, or we gonna go get our guns, or we going to show up in y'all neighborhood, and hey man, violence begets violence. How in the hell we going to stop this violence if we got other people who really, they're saying, okay, I'm distraught and I'm out of my mind. They can't think straight. But there are individuals out there who talking about they friends or they homeboys, and they really didn't care about them. Now who are talking about So what do we do? I'm not talking to the people out here who have themselves in a leadership position. We got many Black leaders out here. We got leaders of Black organizations. We got people who are putting on events, who have the ear of the people. Hey man, somebody got to start saying something, man. Are we gonna continue to kill each other out here in this community with no resolve? Listen, we got to put the guns down. We got to put the guns down. And I know people are hurting out there, man. And my condolences go out to every family member who has lost a loved one due to violence. Not just one or two that have this has happened to. I'm talking to about every family member and every person who has lost someone close to them due to violence. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to resolve our own issues in our own community. If we don't resolve our own issues, they're going to continue to perpetuate, and sooner or later, it's going to knock on your door. So something has to happen, and it has to happen now. If we can start to work together, if we can start to speak out against some of this stuff that's happening in our community, we might be able to bring some resolve in our community. Because there are many of us say, well, I can't do nothing. Them young people going to do what they want to do, this, that, and the third. But what I will say to you is don't add to it. Don't put your 2 cents in it. Oh, man, shoot, we know them jokers over there did it. Let's go. Man, you don't know who did it. Some people don't know who did it. They just saying stuff. If you ain't got nothing else to do, why don't you keep your mouth shut? Why don't you say nothing instead of adding to the chaotic situation? We got to change, ladies and gentlemen. We have some upcoming elections. Yeah, local elections. You got politicians in place. Some politicians feel that they don't even need you. We have to show them that they need us to put them back in a place so that they can work for us. We have to do that. If we don't do that, who else going to do it? Who's going to hold them accountable? So I want to talk about some stuff, ladies and gentlemen, that's paramount to stabilization in the community. When people return from incarcerated environments, they find themselves in a situation where their life has not changed and they move back into the same areas that they came from. They're now in a situation where it is more conducive for them to commit criminal acts and puts them back in the system again. We got to change this, because this is the way of thinking that causes all this violence in our community. There's a particular way of thinking. The person who is thinking about trying to be successful or trying to get a leg up out of this situation that they're in, whether it be poverty or it be a lack of education or a lack of skills, there's some people who have a drive in them who are trying to get out of these situations. But we got to make it better for them, so that we can have this manner of thinking within the dynamics of our community. People saying that, hey, man, we don't want to live like this anymore. We want to change. How do we change that way of thinking? Well, first, we got to put some things in place. I spoke last week in regards to how many people are returning to free world society, people who are coming from jails and prisons. It's about 10,000 people released every week from state, fed, jailhouses. It's about 650,000 people being released every year back home to situations and circumstances that are conducive to going back to prison. What can we do? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start to offer something that can hopefully change the way we think. I've been helping a lot of people who have returned from jail and who have returned from prison. I've helped them get their 501c3s. I am a formerly incarcerated individual, and When I got out of prison, I didn't have any skills. I didn't have any real education, nor did I have parents or family that I could return to who had a substantial amount of money who could set me up. So I returned to a community that, in my opinion, was unwelcoming. So I had to figure out something. I had something in me, a drive in me to say, hey, man, I just don't want to go back to prison no more. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any skills to do anything, but I knew I didn't want to go back to prison. So I started to try to figure out things on my own. And I know that's difficult. It's tough to try to figure things out on your own when you really don't know the direction to go in. But all praises due to Jehovah, man. I had an opportunity to start going places and listening, not because I was invited, but because I didn't want to go back to prison. I started to go to meetings that I had never been to before, county commissioners meeting or city council meeting. I started to hear about events going on in the community, and I started to go to these events so that I could gather knowledge or at least gather information so that I didn't have to go back to prison. That was my only goal, ladies and gentlemen, was not to go back to prison. So I started to learn things. And I heard about this thing called a 501c3. I thought that it was an avenue that could probably help me develop an organization, something that I wanted to do, something that I could do and didn't have to have a lot of skills, but I had the compassion to be able to do it. So I started looking at how to do it. I couldn't find nobody in my community to do it for me because, you know, people charge to write 501c3s, a little bit beyond my financial threshold where I was, especially if you're getting out of prison. If you're getting out of prison, you ain't really got no money. Even if you ain't getting out of prison, there are many of us moving around here working a paycheck to paycheck job, but we have this idea and we have this compassion and we want to do something that can be beneficial to our community as well as to our own family, but we don't have the money. That's how it was. I didn't have the money. So I started to research on how to write a 501c3. I started to do that. As I looked and I searched to try to find out how to write a 501c3, I came across a lot of information. Federal government giving out information for free. So I went in and I pulled this up, and I didn't realize at that time when I first initially wrote my 501c3, they had two different types of 501c3s that you could actually obtain. I did the loan form, which was a tremendous amount of work for me. It was, it was painstaking. And I understand why people charge for it. It's painstaking. It's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, it's worth the work that you put in. So I found that out that it was another way to do it, which is a short form. There's a short form out there that individuals can do that's more conducive to individuals who don't have a lot of time to spend trying to write this thing up, taking them 2 or 3 months trying to do it themselves. Or if you don't have a lot of knowledge, even if not to be offensive, your intellectual aptitude is not that high. This particular form is more conducive to you completing and finishing in a timely manner versus the long form, and that's a 1023-EZ. So I found out that a little bit later, but nevertheless, I wrote my 501c3. So now what I do is I kind of help other people write their 501c3s, but not write them, but help them to develop their organization, because you got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, it's more to having an organization than just having a 501c3. Many people think if you got a 501c3, oh, you good. Most people research and they try to find people to just help them write a 501c3 and have no idea about how to put together an organization, knowing that there are other components that go along with that 501c3. Not just that 501c3 will help you to achieve your goals. It's only a start. There are several other documents that you should have as well as having that 501c3. Then you got to learn how to develop your organization. Then you got to learn how to search for funding to support your organization. Otherwise, you're still in the same place. I know people out there who've had 501c3s for years and have not done anything with it. I want to help some people, man. I want to start coming on here every week and talking about how do we become successful? How do we successfully re-enter society? And I'm not just talking about people who are returning citizens, formerly incarcerated individuals, but there are people who are living in society who don't know how to successfully navigate society. They have great ideas and they have this passion and compassion to help people, but yet they don't know how to get started. And what that does is it helps us to impact society from many different aspects. One aspect is it helps that returning citizen to stay on track or stay focused, which will reduce our recidivism rate. It also helps that person who may be thinking about or engaged in criminal activity to become more focused on his dream versus the criminal activity. So it impacts our community in a great way. So I want people to start to understand that, hey man, just because you have a 501c3 doesn't make you successful. Doesn't make you have an organization. It makes you have something on paper. Because if it's not functioning, you have yourself nothing. Because it's not going to impact whether it's your family or it's the community that you're trying to serve. What I want to do is I want to get people to a place where they're learning how to not just impact their families, but impact their community at large. I want you to learn how to search for money. I want you to learn how to formulate your organization and cultivate it so that it fits into the particular funding source that you needed to fit in order to stabilize your organization. I just said, man, there are 650,000 individuals returning from incarcerated environments every single year. Probably more than that when you count all the jails, all the work camps, people who are getting off probation and all of that, man. And there are some geniuses out there. There are some people out there who have Einstein IQs, but are not doing anything with it because they feel they don't have the opportunity. So we want to do every week, man. This is Reentry 101. And I'm not just talking about reentry from an incarcerated environment. I'm talking about reentry back into productive society. Sometimes, man, you could be on a job so long you become a slave to that job. And if you lose that job, it's difficult for you to get back into the job screen and get another job because you have become so acclimated or brainwashed to that particular job that you haven't looked for anything else because you've been there 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. You haven't thought about anything else. You didn't increase your education while you were there. You didn't look for any other skills while you were there. You just sat on that job, and now they've gotten rid of you from that job, and you don't know what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many people who are like that trying to re-enter society as a productive member of society. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to help you, man. There are several things that we have to look at. We have to look at the employment ratio first. When you're talking about going into employment for the first time, for the second or third time, or after being on one job for 10, 5, 15, 20 years and having to look for another job, you have to have something to offer that particular employer, or you're going to have to start your own business. That's what I did. Because one, like I said, I didn't have anything to offer. I didn't have a good education. I didn't have any real skills, but I had passion and I had compassion. And I knew once I lock into something, I'm not going to be deterred. And that's what happens because there are a lot of road bumps for us. I started out and got my 501c3, ladies and gentlemen, and for years didn't get $1. Well, let me take that back. I started getting money from an organization at the lowest level, which was $200. And I didn't mind that. In fact, when I got my first $200, I was ecstatic. But I wanted to go after bigger pots. See, because that pot, it didn't require much, and when I say much, it was a really short form of short application. And that's what we call low-hanging fruit. It was a short application. I was able to fill it out and talk a little bit about what we were doing or what we were going to do with the $200, which is not a lot of money. And I was able to receive that. But as you grow and you want to serve more people and you want to have a greater impact, you got to start thinking about even the staff members you have. As a convicted felon, there are a lot of restrictions. There are a lot of barriers that are out there. So when you start your organization, you have to understand that as well. I had to learn a different system to navigate, as well as trying to navigate the nonprofit system. So I hadn't got my 501c3, but yet still I had no real skills. I had this passion and compassion, and I had not really gotten any large or substantial amounts of money. So when I decided to try to go after larger amounts of money, it was a roadblock there, because in applying for these particular grants, they wanted a little more information, even about the executive director, which that was the position that I was in. And based on who you're going to serve, there are restrictions, because I was a convicted felon. And because many people are convicted felons or they have something on their record, there are restrictions. So there's another system that comes in play that you have to be able to navigate. If you can't navigate that system, then your organization is still stuck in the mud. So I had to learn how to navigate that. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to go through this, I'm going to do series after series, and I'm going to talk to us about how to kind of navigate some of these systems that have us stuck, even when it comes to having felons on your records. Ladies and gentlemen, they have to use a system of statutes from 435. 43507, 43501 through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those statutes articulate the particular statute violations that prohibit you from working with certain populations, like juveniles, working in hospitals, working in schools, or the health system, and all of that. So you got to think about that. That's a whole nother system that you may have to navigate. But we're going to learn how to navigate that system as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I got 4 exemptions. I got an exemption from the Department of Health. I got an exemption from the Department of Juvenile Justice. I got an exemption from the Department of Education. And I got a 4th exemption from the Department of, I forget the name of it, but I got a 4th exemption. And all those exemptions, I mean, for me, they were mandatory because I had such an extensive criminal history. If they say that you cannot work at a place, so I'm talking to people out there who may not be building an organization, but may be trying to navigate their way back into society, re-enter the productive world of society. So there are many people who got felons. Ladies and gentlemen, if they say that you are disqualified by the Florida Statute 435, that means they have to offer you an opportunity to be exempt by the very same statutes. So if you go through that statute, you can read through it and you'll come to a place, and I'm thinking I have to look, and I'll have you on the next broadcast, ladies and gentlemen, when we start talking about exemptions. I'll have that particular statute where you'll see that there's a statute that will allow you to have an opportunity to go through an exemption process. But even going through that, there are particular things that you'll have to do. So we got to impact our society. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I'm here now, because I've talked about some of everything that you want to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. I talked about politics. I talked about voting. I talked about the violence in the community. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about how to become a successful navigator in our community, ladies and gentlemen. And it can be difficult because there are a lot of barriers, especially if you, one, are a returning citizen. If you don't have a decent education, if you have a low intellectual aptitude, if you have other barriers that are in your life that are going to slow you down, ladies and gentlemen, I want to help you to kind of navigate to get to a place so that you can at least start living out your dream or operating within the dynamics of the passion that you have to do something and be successful at it while helping people. So we'll start with those particular components. First, we'll talk about the 501c3, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll talk about the two different types of 501c3. So I want you to catch me on my next show, ladies and gentlemen, because on the next broadcast, I'm going to talk about the two different 501c3s, and I'm going to talk about the two types of 501c3s, and I'm going to talk about how easy it is to navigate that short form versus the long form. Many of you can keep your money in your pocket. You won't have to pay for individuals to come and help you do it and all of that, because I'm going to walk you through it. I'll tell you where to find it at, and I want to walk you through it. But you got to understand, that's just the beginning. And there are several documents that you should have prior to you even getting your 501c3, like your EIN. You should have that. You should have your exemption form as a exempt organization here in Florida, as the Florida Department of Revenue offers an exempt certificate so you can buy things tax-free. You should also have your charitable certificate, which is a certificate from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services saying that you are allowed to be a solicitor of contributions in the state of Florida. Many people are operating right now and they don't have that. You should have a CH number. You should have that particular document as well. So there are a few documents that you should have along with your 501c3 if you want to be operating above board. Ladies and gentlemen, it is imperative that we start to operate above board, and so that we can start going after funding that all these other agencies are going after, man. That's why we have such a difficult time within the dynamics of our neighborhoods and our community, is because we don't have the resources. But the resources are out there. We just have to be prepared to obtain the resources. If you're a 501c3 organization and you're just sitting on your 501c3 organization, ladies and gentlemen, you got to get some kind of fire up in you. I mean, you can't be easily discouraged. You can't even imagine the amount of times I was discouraged before I won one substantial grant, one substantial contract. And now I'm sitting at a place where I've had several contracts. Even one last year for almost $600,000. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, that's correct. Me, a person who came all the way from where I came from incarceration, from lack of education, from all of that. There are many different hurdles that I had to get over, but I'm saying something to say something. Ladies and gentlemen, I was able to get over those hurdles. So if I was able to do it, and ladies and gentlemen, I have an extensive criminal history, nothing to brag about, but to tell you that you have the ability to do the same thing. You just got to have the drive. You can't allow yourself to just give up on your dreams and your goals. So I want to be able to help us, ladies and gentlemen, get in a better position. And the better position that we get in, the more influence that we have in our community and the more impact we have in our community. Because as your organization grows, you're going to encounter a lot of people. You're going to be able to help a lot of people. In that, you're going to be able to get a lot of people to go and vote, which impacts our political system. In that, you may be able to keep a lot of people out of prison, which will reduce our recidivism rate. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to start thinking from a different perspective. There's a lot of funding in this city. People think it's not. There's a lot of funding in this city. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to help you access that. So I want you to check me out every week. We're going to start talking about it. Next week, we're going to delve into 501c3s. People who are thinking about getting 501c3s, people who already have 501c3s. Hey, man, we want to start getting into that because we got to change the dynamics of our community. And we can do that by implementing resources in our community. Your agency can become a resource. You can become a resource to your community. People try to covet this stuff, which is psychotic. That's why our kids out there killing each other, because they don't got nothing else to do. They don't got nowhere else to go. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to stick with me and follow me, man. I'm about to close on this on my live radio show. Hey, y'all start tuning in to us on Choice 106.9 FM. That's Mr. Hill, who does a tremendous amount for this community. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all start tuning in with us on Choice 106.9 FM. Ladies and gentlemen, please patronize him as well. Keep checking us out, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be back to check you guys out next week. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about 501c3s. Peace.